Hey everybody, welcome to the GMG review. Today we're taking a look at 5 Leagues from the Borderlands 3rd edition. Solo and co-oping adventure wargaming, printed by Modiphius and written by Ivan Sorensen. Now this has been around for quite some time as a self-published book, and Modiphius has done this beautiful hardcover in like 6x10. This is a great format for a game book, I'll be honest, especially a game book of this type. And it's in full color and gives you all of your rules for basically creating a warband of 6 figures and having adventures that are procedurally generated. So while you can write all the sort of background interactions for your campaign, what you're given here is a very sort of like comprehensive framework for the sort of the next ingredient in the story you're cooking, which for solo and co-op wargaming is a fantastic mix basically of being told what to do next, but also being options of how what you're told to do next interacts with like the progression of the bad guys you're encountering, the stories, whatever it is you're trying to tell as a story. And it can also be played co-op with multiple avatars, as they're called, which is the player character, and their followers basically joining forces to complete adventures and missions and stuff. You also build a map, which I think is wonderful, starting in a given location, some type of wild hinterlands or in a town, and then proceed to have adventures. So it's got kind of a dash of everything without requiring a ton of assets. It just requires some polyhedral dice, so D&D style dice, some pens and paper to keep track of your warband and stuff like that, and you're ready to rock and roll. So now this has been available digitally for a while. Modiphius did a sort of a pre-order crowdfund for these beautiful hardcover books, and they sent me a copy as a complimentary review piece. So I've been holding off on this one for a while because I've had the rules for a long time. But I like to get most excited about something when you guys can grab it too in physical format if you want, or in digital. I'll put the link in the video description, and we'll talk about this game a little bit. So I'm going to do what I usually do. I'm going to give you sort of my general impression review of the actual game system, having done the introductory scenario, and my impressions of 2 elements: the before the game part, how that made me feel as a gamer, and the after the game part, how that made me feel sort of like as a sort of, I guess the first part's as a hobbyist, the second part's like as a gamer. So the hobbyist part. Okay. So diving into the index, which will be the best way to parse this, this is a very comprehensive rulebook. It's about 230 pages, and starts off in my favorite format of make the stuff you're going to play with first. So it lays everything out in a temporal format. The introduction even talks about that. We're going to do everything in this book in the order you would do it in as the player. So it starts with character creation. And there's tons in here to do and tons of archetypes to play through, and obviously sort of hints that there'll be more. But the basic format is 6 heroes and 2 followers. The followers can also gradually be heroes. So right away I was excited because I have this Reaper Bones Kickstarter that I've been trying to dig into for a while, and I've been writing rules to play with it, which have like stopped and started, and then which I still have a section of these miniatures that I'm going to play with my kids. And then looking for like the right thing to kind of inspire me to use all these great character models outside of an RPG on the table. Because part of what I like doing with collecting adventure miniatures is seeing them do something. And I loved that when I played through the original Rages of Shadowdeep when Joe wrote it. And it first came out, I had my like Microsoft Word copy, and I played through all the adventures. You can still, of course, go up to a playlist and check out all those missions. This has got that same kind of feel. So you pick 6 figures that you like, and it actually just says pick 6 miniatures. Don't worry about too much about what they have. Just pick 6 miniatures, 4 of which look suitably heroic, 2 of which are kind of like followers. And then you can either have them all be human or give them a character origin that is sort of more like interesting. You can roll for it or you can pick. So it's either human, Feyblood, Duskling, Preen, Halfling, and Feral. And you'll notice it doesn't give you particularly like, you know, the typical fantasy trope name like elf, dwarf, whatever. It just says these are like archetypes for those different backgrounds in things like D&D. So like Feyblood could be an elf, it could be a gnome, it could be a bunch of those things. Duskling could be something like a dwarf, or like one of the harder things. Preen is like an animal creature, like a birdman or something like that, or a cat person. A halfling is obviously a halfling, or no, maybe, and then feral is like supposed to encompass maybe even like the cat people, the Khajiits from Morrowind, or you've got like the lizard people, like orcs, stuff like that. So the idea here is like whatever your sort of miniature collection is, you can find a background for it. Everyone starts with the same base agility score, and those things are going to add and subtract new abilities to it. And that's your origin. Then generating the heroes, you need to pick a background, and the background gives you a bunch of tables to play on. So like, I love, the backgrounds are sort of like, where did you come from? What have you learned up to this point at which you became an adventurer? So it's not quite a class system, although it will kind of put you on a path towards being like a miniature that plays a certain way. So like, a frontier background is kind of the generic adventurer. A ranger type, you know, like an Aragorn sort of dude, Dunedain. A mystic background is like a wizard, potentially a, you know, like a warlock. A noble background, you could be like a knight. An outsider, you could be a thief. Townsfolk, you're just a city person. You know, you learn city things like a blacksmith. And then the zealot background means you could be some type of like, sort of like a follower of like some greater power, something like that. You can even use zealot as a warlock. You know what I mean? They're doing magical powers based on what their patron's doing. But it's nice and generic enough that no matter what miniatures I put in that bag, I'm gonna have, you know, a sort of like a theme for them, and they'll do something neat. So my plan is that I'm going to use one of each. So you have 6. I'll have 6. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm gonna have one of each different, and I'll play with like a full mixed bag when I do the playthrough. Then you have your skills. So what you do is you then roll on the table, right, to see which of these sort of like fun bucks you get added to your basic profile. So you'll have a random capability, a random mentality bonus, a random possession, and a random training, which is either skills or bonus experience that will add you later on. And then that's all explained sort of later on. Then your followers, your 2 sorry, I guess I'll have, the heroes don't get backgrounds. Oh no, they do get backgrounds, they just don't get any bonuses. Determine your follower table. Oh yeah, you just roll to see what kind of follower they are. You don't actually see. So I'll have 4 of these basically. You know what, I'll roll for them right now. So I have 4 different backgrounds I could potentially have, D6. So 4, 6, 6, 6, 3, 4, 3, 4, 6, 2, 3, 4, 6. So that means I'm gonna have a, 2 is a mystic, a noble, an outsider, and a zealot. So those are gonna be my heroes. And so no townsfolk and no frontier. That sucks because I was most excited with the frontier person. I wanted to have a ranger. Maybe I'll just have one of my backgrounders be that. Maybe I'll just veto it. Maybe I just won't use the roll. I'll decide in a minute. And then generate your followers, and that's a D100 table. Love any game with a D100 table in it. So like I'd have an 82 studious apprentice and a 43 hopeful youth. So a hopeful youth adventurer. Then you get resources and equipment stuff that you get to add on top of it. And then the avatar, they have a history, so like a story about where they're coming from in the beginning. So mine could be that we are 60? So 60 is... Or yeah, at 60, why can I not see you? Oh, 59 to 66. An organization you used to belong to is willing to help you one last time. The first time you receive a quest, you can immediately roll for a quest and find the quest finds table. So like you already have like a plot point basically. If someone gives you a quest while you're out in town or someone tells you like a thing you have to go do, then I could like recruit basically the help of my former organization. So maybe I got kicked out of the Rangers, maybe I got kicked out of something. There we go, maybe I got kicked out of the Rangers and that's why. Now, the idea here is you've made your characters, so fantastic. It's going to jump into the core mechanics of the game now, so the game rules, how to set up a battle and play a game. So it uses a 5-phase system and a really sort of unique way of doing initiative, where everyone has a reaction stat, and you roll a number of dice for all of your heroes equal to the number of heroes and followers that you have, and then you assign all the dice. Every die that you roll, it's equal to or under their reaction, or their initiative. I can't remember if it's called initiative or reaction. It's called reaction 5 parsecs from home. I might be using that interchangeably. Hang on. I don't want to get it wrong. Agility, sorry. Agility in this game. It's reaction in 5 parsecs. Under the equal or under the initiative is going, or the agility, sorry, is going to be people who act then in the quick action phase. Anyone who has a dice that's higher is in the slow action phase. And the enemies go in between. So it's kind of a cool randomizer, like rolling for initiative in D&D, where you get to basically not be able to always count on the exact piece you want to have going before the bad guys, if you roll really badly. But if you roll at least 1 or 2 like really low numbers on the handful of dice, you're gonna get them to go first. So it injects a little bit of chaos, and it's not just a predictable, all your heroes go, something else go, the bad guys go, then you go with like your slowest guys. You're not gonna know necessarily what that is, and you might have to assign it turn by turn. You might not get to pick it all. And sometimes the enemies might just get the action, the jump on you all the time. So actions are usually a move plus a non-combat or combat action. So like move and touch something, like interact. move and engage in melee combat or make a range attack. And if you make a range attack, you don't get like your combat bonus if you've moved already, so you might want to forfeit your move to stand still. Then there's the tracking phase, and during that part of the battle round, any end of round abilities happen. So like all features caused or by or affecting Warband members. So like if there's a fire burning somewhere, there's like a magical fog coming through. All features caused or affected by enemies. So like if, you know, some of the creature is like on fire and it's like always hurting people that are nearby it. And then things that the scenario or the event might do as well. And then finally anything else that happens. It's basically like your end step. You have two move stats. You have your move and your plus move, and the plus move is if you dash. Basically, if you forfeit your second action, you get to add that. It's typically lower, so most models start with a 4-inch move and a 3-inch dash, which means they go 7 inches total if they move, which is a nice feature. It also means you can have like uneven and more interesting characters that might be kind of lumbering but then dash really far. So like they can get they're not fast if they're fighting, but as soon as they stop fighting and focus on moving, they can get really speedy. So I actually really like that mechanically speaking. Typical like terrain rules. And from there, you're getting into all of the fun stuff about like equipment and proficiency and skills and stuff. So there's different like spells that you can pick up, the nature of your spell. They're all, again, kind of generic enough that you could have them be on good wizards, bad wizards, like whoever you want your wizard to be. And those incantations have like a rule, you know, so their own separate rule set for basically doing them. And only one of your models can be a mystic in the Warband. So you only get a single caster, not everybody can be a caster. And they get the casting stat on top of a normal casting. And then you get a starter scenario. So right from there, it's just core rules and stuff. Once you get to page 55, they jump into a starter scenario, and they don't give you like the complicated campaign setup right away. And I actually really like this about the way the book's divided, is it goes, here's exactly enough like quick start wise that you might know how to play, and they boil it into 55 pages, which is a nice sort of like parsing. And then they don't make you generate characters either. There's 4 pre-generated characters and 4 pre-generated bad guys, a scenario to set up on a 2x2 table, and then just go. And then they say, after you finish rolling up your own character like posse, come back and we'll do another scenario where you add a few more bad guys and play it. So that's what I'm gonna do, is I'm gonna roll up my posse and I'm gonna play this starter scenario with my own posse made up basically as like the let's play for this. All right, and then story points, unusual situations, how to interpret like contradictory rules, and it gives you like an order of what's greater than what. You can pay a story point to make something happen in the campaign. I really like this idea if it fits with the ongoing story. This might mean fighting a specific type of enemy, because that'd be more sense, or having like an old friend show up. Story points are kind of like I'm the writer and I need something to happen. So like it's like a third act new character you might have to write in to like make something happen. And you get a story point for playing. I'm gonna start with a story point, and the person I'm gonna play the campaign with, Jay, is not, because I'm gonna play through the introductory scenario. So sorry, Jay, you're gonna miss that, but this is how we learn. This is how I learned how to play a game before you you jump in. And the idea will be that the sort of like, they're like a free but limited resource that you can kind of mold to make your campaign go the way that you want it to, or to like balance things or whatever. Covers made of people. Characters may not attempt to be shot if the line of sight is obscured by friendly models. I like that. Saving throws. Just a bunch of like kind of like advice for playing the game here in the unusual situations thing. I like it because it's almost like designer notes, and it's worth, I think, doing in a game like this where so much of it is we're giving you a framework of like inspiration and ideas, but then we have to trust that you're going to run with it and not be like, well, the rules didn't say I could, or the rules didn't say I can. Because if you're looking for that kind of game, that's not what this kind of game is. So it does some really good kind of like, this is the kind of game you're playing. These are the things you're going to run into. Our advice is just do what feels right for most of these. Or some general like guidelines of like what trumps what. Equipment, your backpack, like what you can carry in your backpack with a total of 8 items. Equipment can get damage in this, which I liked as well. And you have different types of weapons, basic weapons, which are like things you could basically make yourself, like a staff or a cudgel. Quality weapons, something you have to make like in a blacksmith shop. And then superior weapons, which are fine or balanced or quick or fey. So they're quality weapons that are in some way different or made slightly differently, and they have additional bonuses. Tons of rules for armor, enemy weapons, different other things like bandages, coils of rope, 50 feet of rope, mystic trinkets. It's all your D&D basic essentials, right? And like what type of skill check you need to use them is here in brackets. An old dusty manual And then we're into part 2, which is setting up a campaign. So again, by page 66, you've basically got enough that you can functionally play the game and play the beginner scenario. And I would recommend that anyone trying this game for the first time just stop there. Don't bother reading the campaign stuff yet. Don't get too excited. Make a warband, play the initiative scenario, and then this is going to make more sense. The combat system, so I guess before we get too far away from the actual like story system, the combat system is actually fairly simple. It's only going to be, I think, like 5 or 6 pages in here. And there's no wound stat, which I actually kind of like. So before I move on too far, I should probably talk about that. The combat system is like a dueling system where you have engagements until one side either backs off or is injured, and then the combat sequence ends. So what happens is the person that initiates the combat starts off as the aggressor. They roll a dice and add their combat stat, and the opponent rolls their dice and adds their combat stat. The higher person basically wins the combat and then rolls to see if they can try and injure somebody by either overcoming their armor or overcoming their toughness. So they've landed a blow. But there's also combat styles you can do to try to like fight differently. So you can fight defensively, and if you fought defensively, so let's say the attacker rolled a 5 again, the defensive fighter would roll 2 dice and pick the highest, but doesn't get to strike a hit if they win, and then the counterattack ability can also be negated by doing that. They can fight evasively, so you roll normally, but if the defender wins, then they get to move 2 inches and it basically ends the combat. They duck out of the combat. They can also fight furiously, where they roll to attack, but if they don't win the attack, they take a wound because they basically expose themselves to the enemy. And then you resolve the exchange. If the attacker has the higher score, they strike a blow and remain as the attacker in the following exchange. If the defender has the higher score, they avoid harm and become the attacker in the following exchange. So if the defender wins, they can become the attacker if they didn't do something like fight evasively. So like if someone attacks you, you almost always want to fight defensively. You don't inflict any hits though, basically. So if the defender has the higher score, they avoid harm and become the attacker in the following exchange. So if they inflict no hits, and this tactic negates all possible sorts of counterattack. And then on a draw, the defender retreats 1 inches backwards, the attacker remains in place, and the melee ends. Somebody can just back off as well. So it's a neat sort of, and there's different types of tactics that you can play with as well. But the core one is just dice off, add your combat stat, and once you've actually landed a hit, you're trying to overcome either armor or toughness. So if you have an armor value, then you're trying to roll to try and get over it. So you roll to overcome it, and you're trying to basically, it's by how strong you are if you're going to do it or not. If the defender lost the exchange, they must now retreat backwards 1 inch if possible. The attacker may opt to remain in place, or they can choose to step up 1 inch and remain in melee. You get combat bonuses if the opponent's stunned, or if there's another friend there, but it only ever caps out at +1. You can use counterattack if they are on a higher ground than their opponent. They're fighting across an obstacle. The opponent's standing on difficult ground like water. They have weapons, abilities, or traits to grant the counterattack benefits. So things like a dueling sword might give you like counterattack. And then parrying, sometimes a figure has the right item and training to deflect blows. Parrying is a combat only available to characters with a weapon, item, or ability that grants it. If a character rolls a natural 1 defending in melee combat, they deflect the blow, avoiding all effects of being hit, such as damage, stun, or other effects. So if they roll a 1, which normally would suck, they actually do better. And then multiple parry sources have no additional effect. So it makes 1s just like a natural critical state, basically, for defending. But a 2 would still be bad. And then next exchange, the winner of the combat skill exchange during step 3 will have the initiative in the exchange, making them the attacker. If this was the 3rd exchange in a row, the melee then automatically ends, and then each combatant moves back 1 inch and separates. So a maximum of 3 of these exchanges happen. And so because of like the push mechanic, you can actually have models moving around during fights, which I think is cool, because like every time you see a sword fight in a movie, models are actually like banging into each other. I think of like the Inigo Montoya Dread Pirate Roberts fight in The Princess Bride, where they're just moving all over the map, you know what I mean, fighting each other and swinging through things. It does really feel like that. I think it's a nice kind of like feature. So you roll a d6 and add overcome armor. If the total is higher than the armor value of the target, proceed to step 2. If it's equal to the armor, then they're stunned, and the attack fails, but like you do get the stun bonus, which means you get +1 combat in the next exchange. And if it's lower than armor, this completely fails. If you overcome toughness, roll d6. On a natural 1, the target's stunned. On a 2 to 6, add any overcome toughness attack that they have. If the total is higher than the toughness rating of the target, then they become a casualty removed from the table. So, and if it's lower, then it's wounded and stunned. So if you think about it, on a 4+, you're just taken out of action. So being wounded actually is a significant thing in this. And if you get hit, you could just die very quickly. So you need to be, there's no like extra wounds, but there's an option for less brutal wounds. If you find the regular system is just too brutal, a character can be wounded multiple times. Place a token each time it happens. All strikes on a character that's wounded increase the damage by +1/+0. So 1 less to overcome armor, but 1 more to overcome toughness. Any effects that remove wounded status remove a single token. I note this rule can result in battles taking slightly longer, and if you use this rule, then consider like the turnarounds and stuff like that. So the combat is pretty brutal, but I think my favorite thing about it is the fact that models engage with each other, will like push each other around during the combats. And you have this kind of like moving fight system. And the tactics thing is neat too, because it actually does make it feel a lot more like your weapons matter and your decisions matter too. All right, so that's the first half, like the getting ready to play half. I guess there's a little bit more in the starting the campaign section. So starting a campaign, you're gonna set up a region. So I'm gonna call my region the 9 Finger Mountains. That's where we're gonna be taking place in. And we're gonna start off in the hinterlands, which are like at the edge of the 9 Finger Mountains. You have to establish if there's any settlements in the area and how large they are. So roll a D100 and consult the settlement population table. And this will give you the number of settlements, and you roll to see the settlement types. So if you roll a D100, so the hinterlands could have 79, 2 hamlets, a village, and a town. So then you roll for like the hamlet, it's a 79, it's a market town, and its effects is the first time you finish here during the campaign, add an adventure point. The second hamlet is a 53, a manor. The community is gathered at the gates of an extensive manor. If you visit the blacksmith here, you can pay to repair 2 items that are damaged. A 76 for the village, which is a market town, and then so you get a market village and a market hamlet, and the town itself is a 98. A trading hub. The town's built along an important road or river, making a natural pause for merchants. So maybe there's a pass in the 9 Finger Mountains. You get 1 additional gold mark to receive 1 additional rare goods roll once per campaign turn. So you've got like a setup feature basically for like where you're playing. And then create your map. You can play this campaign on a map of your region. You can borrow a map from an existing fantasy world or create your own. The exact scale of the map isn't important, and you can be as simple or as elaborate as you like. So I'm going to draw a map for this because I think that'll be fun. You can use a notepad to keep track, but exploring a cool map will make the game more appealing, and we can draw new locations as we go. So I'm just going to draw a map that has like the hinterlands as the first place I'm going to write into it. I'll draw some mountains, I'll draw the locations of the settlements, and we'll be ready to start exploring it. For now, mark each settlement in the map, placing them some distance apart and leaving plenty of empty space and wilderness. Then fill in 4 to 5 place names on the map, such as rivers, forests, mountain passes, and swamps, just for flavor. And this is all you need to start. And then the map's divided up into map areas. They're not any fixed size, but large enough that it'd take your warband a couple days to go across them. If using a hex map or similar, just treat each hex map as a map area. And if you're doing a freehand or drawing pre-existing ones that don't have hexes, you don't need to divide the whole map into map areas. So just don't worry about it. But you could like color code a map area. So what I'm planning on doing is I'll black and white like pen and ink my map. And then if I want to create a map area that I'm like exploring, I'm gonna like pencil crayon color in sections, almost like you did in Skyrim, where like the fog would lift off a piece of a map as you like walked around it. And then the locations obviously we rolled up. Hidden locations are things that are hidden, so they're the new things that you draw on your map. Marking your position, so just some way to mark my current position. So I'm just gonna probably use like a model or like a sticker to move around, maybe like some kind of sticker that can come off. And then determine your threats. Each region is under attack from dangers. We refer to these as threats. There's 2 categories of threats: foes within and foes without. Roll a D100 and consult to use which determine you have. And so like the ruins within, criminals, evil gnawing horde, the ice heart court, a cruel elf, the whispers from beyond, so undead. So you're basically rolling to see what kind of enemies there are inside the society there, and then foes without, you roll D100 and see what kind of the bad guys on the outside of the society. And it could be everything from like Dusking Warbands, the oldest kin, so reptiles from beyond time, the curse of war, like chaos guys, fools, ghouls and war cultists, the faceless kingdom, a cruel invading army. And then you establish the threat levels. So select one of the primary and give it threat level 6, and the other one becomes threat level 5. These threat levels are measure the power the enemy has in the area. The aim of your campaign is to reduce all the threats in the area to 0. So you're basically trying to fight against enough missions that everybody's threat goes down, and it kind of like borrows from like certain video games. I remember there's one called Crackdown, where the various different like organizations would be holding territories in this city, this like sci-fi city, and you have to beat them all up until they went away. It's the same kind of idea. And then you play some additional points of interest. So I love this part of the pregame where we get to make our own kind of like map campaign and do some like world crafting. So already this is my preferred way to like be inspired. The book's not telling me what to do, it's just giving me ingredients to kind of cook my own dinner with. I have a pile of models, I have a pile of like sort of starting places to imagine what they're armed with and what they have, and then I also have this like world that I'm going to build right away. The campaign structure itself, I'm not going to get too into, but basically you're going to procedurally generate each mission. There's a table for each of the type of bad guys and who they could be. And when you play the game, you're going to see a little bit more, but you have like a sergeant and a villain in every mission, and defeating them is kind of like the whole purpose, depending upon what kind of mission you're doing. So every quest when you're on the table, there's going to be bad guys around, but you're also trying to do something at the same time, and that could change mission by mission. So it could be like retrieve something, rescue somebody, scout the area, kill a specific like bad guy. And as you go through, these quests are going to kind of reveal themselves as story points, and the vast majority of the rest of the book is kind of along that. So I'm not really going to go too much more into it, because you can discover like monster layers that aren't really associated with like the main bad guys and threats and stuff like that. You can find different travelers that you can like bump into that might help you or hinder you or sell you something. And yeah, and then your guys will progress and level up and earn experience and gold and buy things in town, much like they would in your favorite other adventure war game. So the after the game part is pretty satisfying too. I'll probably talk a bit more about it after I've had more than just the first game, because the first game you don't earn experience, you just get a story point. But the core around it is that everyone can progress. And it even encourages you to use new miniatures as you play through. And the resolution step is what's going to cover all that. So the usual stuff is in here, like checking for injuries. There's a milestone, so you reduce your threats. If you fought against a threat and achieve your objective, you can now attempt an adventure milestone to reduce it. If the milestone is achieved, reduce their threat score by 1. Once reduced to 0 and all hideouts have been destroyed, the threat's been eliminated and is no longer present in the region. So if you're victorious in an encounter raid, you get D6. Victorious ride patrols 1. Defeated aberrations 1. Defeated unique foes 2. Defeated lieutenant or captains 1. And then finish a contract is going to collect your adventure points. You'll have fight from the dark. If everyone gets knocked out, then you have to roll. If people get knocked out, you got to roll for injuries. You have recovery time too. And you can get story points if people die. You also have injury tables for like what happens. You could just be, followers could just be dead. They could be moderately injured and have to miss games. They could lose equipment, have item damage, or just escape unscathed. And then flight in the dark is bad. Like basically the chances of you, if you're knocked out for a hero, there's a 20% chance you die, but you gain a story point. You roll 2d6 and pick the highest result for like a serious injury on the serious injury tables. Yeah, there's a bunch of like bad things that can happen. It's how many days you miss is going to be the main one, and then item damage and being knocked out. Nothing's gonna really happen to you. Battered weapons, not good. But you might find some battered weapons for unusual finds. If you held the field at the end of a scenario, you might find like a weapon, a bow, a bastard sword, or a warhammer, but they come out damaged, so you have to go fix them afterwards. You might find a handful of coins, and then your goal, obviously, then, is to advance by getting experience points. If you survive, you get 1. If you kill the enemy leader, you get 1 to the hero that killed them. Distribute XP equally to if an aberration is slain. Aberrations are like the big bads, the monster boss battles. And they're going to allow you to progress and stuff. You also have like your adventure news that reach you. So sometimes news will come to you. Roll D100 in the news table to see what happens as they reach from other lands. So an old friend sends you a letter maybe. And then you get your experience points. You have different advancements, skill selections, raise your toughness, raise your combat. Loot tables. I don't want to spoil them too much because I'm going to find them during the game. And then at various points, you might be directed to find the enemy's plans table. So you have to discover what the enemy's plans are and what they're trying to do. And so like I said, it's all ingredients to try to make up a story as you go. You then get to victory of like clearing a threat. What happens if you get to kill all the hideouts? Then what you get for doing it. And going on to the next campaign. So once you clear all the threats, what do you do afterwards? And then the appendix is just advice. It's just like nice advice on building and painting. And a bunch of like quick ref to find stuff quickly in the book. It has a great index as well, which I was really happy about. And of course, you can just photocopy your character sheets and stuff too, and some news from Modiphius, some advertisements in the back. So The post-game stuff, I'm excited about I guess the thing I can comment on now is I'm excited about the ingredients in here. I'm excited that I'm going to get to craft a story with Jay, and we're going to basically tell the story of exploring the Nine Finger Mountains as our little like adventuring groups. Join forces, come apart, go together, go have adventures, and fight bad guys. So we'll have the initial like creation stuff done, and I'll overview all that in the Let's Play. So creating like the region, I'll show you my map, I'll show you my warbands. We'll go through the first sort of like learning game, and then Jay and I are gonna come together and actually progress through this sort of like adventure until we're done, until we eliminate the threats. So there's no need for sort of bespoke scenarios. There's no need for kind of an adventure guide. We're gonna make the story ourselves with the help of this book. And I think that's what sets 5 Leagues apart from other adventure games. There's gonna be, like, I'm sure there's additional content that would be useful, but outside of this book, we have everything we need to make up our own adventure on our own. And I think that's a unique feature of this book, is that it's not trying to tell us, here's the story, here's the rules, here's the universe you're dropping yourself into. It's more of a guidebook on creating your own fantasy universe, kind of like old school D&D or a Dungeon Crawl Classic, where it's giving you a feeling for the kind of game you're doing, and then giving you the structure for accomplishing that in the tabletop. And if that's what you're into, if you're a creative type that likes your imagination being set off, rather than being given kind of like a movie to watch, which a lot of modern adventure games do, where it's here's the missions, here's the story, here's what you're trying to accomplish, I think there's something great about that. I love those kinds of games too, because I'm like a huge fighting fantasy nerd, and I love those like pick a path, choose your own adventure things where you get to like have like random tables of consequences. It's why I love Cursed City, it's why I love Rangers of Shadowdeep. But this 5 Leagues thing is going to let me be kind of the author of that and a dungeon master, and is kind of enabling me to tell my own story in my own way with a bunch of stuff a bunch of resources I had laying around that I hadn't had a reason to do something with. And I think that kind of makes it unique and sets it apart. So check it out. You can grab the digital version in the link below. There's a Drive-Thru RPG link, which you can grab it from, or you can grab a copy, I believe, right now from Modiphius. Big thanks for watching. We'll see you for more GMG reviews and the Let's Play in the future. Till I'm Ash. Hey there, I hope you enjoyed that video. There are tons of other games already recorded for you to watch. Click over to my channel page if you haven't already, and have a look through the dozens of playlists full of videos. I guarantee you'll discover a game you haven't seen played before. I put out new videos 7 days a week, and every day is themed to a different genre as I continue to explore the wider world of gaming. Of course, none of that's possible without you, the viewer, so click a like and subscribe if you'd like to stay on top of what's happening here daily. My 2 kids and I are massively grateful to be able to have the flexibility of this job so I can always maximize my time with them. If you want to support me continuing to put out this content, it's only possible because of my amazing backers on Patreon who support the studio, equipment, and model cost, as well as being how I make the bulk of my living. You can also help out by buying a t-shirt through Spreadshirt, a measuring gauge or widget from Death Ray Designs, or buying one of my games and supplements like Last Days, Gamma Wolves, and Blaster. As a way of showing my appreciation, patrons get early access to new games and supplements that I write throughout the course of the year. Huge thanks for watching, it really does help out, and happy gaming.